Angela, thank you for taking the time to be on Inclusive Cyber. I know we did a prep call last month, and I know you had mentioned that you are very selective on what podcasts you do and be a part of there. So I want to thank you, straight off the bat there for jumping on this call with me.
You're welcome. I'm very excited to be here. I think that you're very knowledgeable. You have excellent guests, and I think you have a unique angle, several unique angles that are really important. And that's what really drew me to the podcast. So I'm honored that I was asked to be a guest, and you thought I would be a good fit. So I'm excited for the conversation.
Likewise. So let's go ahead and start at the beginning. Can you give a quick overview of who you are and how you got started?
Sure. So I had a former career, had an injury, so I could no longer do that job. And I was at a place where I was like, okay, well, I need to make money. What do I do? So I took a contractor position as a customer service agent for the busy holiday season for a startup e-commerce company. Constantly in the front lines, taking calls from fraudsters, fraud victims, instantly was drawn to it, worked my way up in leadership at that company, and there was an opportunity to transition over to the fraud area. Then I was off and running from there. So I started in e-commerce, and then I transitioned over into financial institutions where I have worked at several different size banks. In fraud, I've worked in the kind of the broader financial crimes umbrella with AML, BSA, new customer onboarding. I worked in compromised data for over a year, which was an awesome experience. So InfoSec in there. And then I looped right back around to fraud, where I've been focusing on, risk management, first line risk management, second line risk management, and consulting executives and leaders on ensuring that they have the appropriate fraud management strategies in place. So lots of hustle and grind. I have transitioned through a lot of different roles. I've had a very strategic career trajectory where I just wanted to experience a lot of things, continue to challenge myself, take every opportunity, give it 100%, and use that as my own ladder. So I created my own ladder with, of course, lots of mentors helping me along the way, but a lot of hustle and grind, and I'm just passionate about this work. I'm just very dedicated to it, and I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of really great partners that have just, continued to elevate me and support me as I worked my way up in this career.
Angela, you said a lot of great things, but I really love the hustle and the grind because that's what it's all about. In Spanish, there's this word or phrase, ganas, right? Just
Yep. Yep.
putting that burning desire to accomplish something. And some people have it, some people don't, but you definitely have it. Based on what you've mentioned in our pre-call there. So let's start at the beginning. So, what was the initial, I guess, interest, or who put that into your mindset to say, hey, maybe this could be a potential career for you when you started off?
So when I was in customer service, I'd worked my way up to a manager position, and a woman that was still in fraud had sent an urgent notice memo to the customer service leader saying, hey, we're getting attacked by fraud right now, and we don't have the right rules and alerts in place to catch it. And you have to remember that this was 15 years ago, and it was a very small startup company. So our rules and alerts were all Tableau, another team. It was a lot of work for us to adjust them. So we could not react in real time to this attack, other than them sending that memo to us. And what we started to do is manually go through the order system to find these fraudulent orders. There were certain characteristics that could stand out really quickly to us. It was kind of quiet in customer service, and my team was really solid. So I just dove into those spreadsheets. I mean, hundreds of orders, looking through them, finding them, going into the back end system and manually canceling the order, which is not how normally the fraud team worked, but that was what we had to do. I actually received special recognition. I saved the company a lot of money by spending that day kind of going in and having an eye for it and catching them and quickly canceling them. position just happened to be opening up soon in that area. They recommended me, and I knew that that was the right thing for me.
No, I appreciate that background. So again, there's that opportunity. For me, I have a kind of a philosophy that life is kind of serendipitous moments. And if you're not ready, both mentally and having, done your homework on whatever topic, in this case, fraud, there was an opportunity, you jumped on it, you saw it as an obstacle and maybe a challenge.
Yeah, definitely.
And, you definitely, helped the team out. And then obviously you got recognized for that. So that's great. A lot of people, unfortunately do exactly what you did, but they might not get recognized. So that's awesome to hear that you had, leaders, you had bosses that provided that recognition.
Absolutely.
Once there was that opportunity to shift, or actually before we get into that, was the fraud through phone? Was it online? Just kind of
No, it was
curious about that.
online. So it was an e-commerce environment only.
Got it.
It was
Got
a
it.
startup company that sold clothing online. It was very easy, just like digital, mobile, online banking, for fraudsters to be more anonymous. And with it being a smaller company that just was not prepared with the technology, there
Right.
was three of us, and our first fraud experience was at that company. So we were learning as we go. We were researching. We were trying to keep up with industry trends. We did, over the couple of years that I was there, introduce new fraud tools. But we really had to be creative. We worked a lot of long hours to get through the orders because there was nothing else that we could do. So at holiday, when the volume went up, we would work really long hours to review all the orders and get them out manually and approve them. So it was very, very intense.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I'm sure you wish you had, generative AI at the time to kind of process all that, right?
Certainly would have been nice.
Yeah, but no, we'll definitely talk a little bit more on AI later on the show. Talk to us about the opportunity after you and your team rose up to the challenge for this particular issue with fraud. What was the opportunity?
So I ended up joining the fraud team and leading it for a couple of years. We were able to build out several new processes. I actually pulled talent from the customer service side and mentored them. I felt that that was a good opportunity as opposed to hiring externally. There was a lot of customer service agents that would help us with our overflow of order review when we were busy. So I would spot that talent and pull them over. I ended up with an incredible opportunity to then join American Eagle Outfitters corporate. They did not have a fraud team. They knew they needed one, so they were launching a new fraud team. It included a new system implementation and tool. It was very, very exciting. Their corporate headquarters was in Pittsburgh. So I actually went over and was a part of their first fraud team. Again, like 4 to 6 of us. And we did a lot of great things together. I'm still in touch with those leaders, but I also left behind, a legacy and mentored talent that I'm also still in touch with today, that also still works in fraud, ended up creating a career out of it, and was very successful with what I left behind. So it's very interesting to think about, my own journey, but then, of course, other people in the industry that I've crossed paths with that I've either mentored or supported, and what their journey ends up looking like. But once I was at American Eagle Outfitters corporate and helped them launch that whole entire team, I had loved my time in e-commerce, but I also knew that at financial institutions, it was much bigger challenge, much more complex environment. And I really liked the idea of getting more into the full risk management piece of it. And that just was not going to present itself in the e-commerce environment. But I had fantastic leaders that supported me. And I just started applying for jobs all the way across the country from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Phoenix, Arizona, for an entry level financial crimes analyst position here in Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm currently located, and ended up finding a manager that loved my application, loved interviewing me, saw the potential, saw the transferable skills there, and gave me an opportunity. And from there, it was just all the way up.
So let's talk about the mentorship because you've mentioned mentoring a lot so far. So how did you ultimately find mentors? Was it part of the company? Was it somebody that you saw that just carried themselves with, this knowledge that they could potentially share? How did you initially kind of, get that mentorship?
So I've had several mentors and leaders that I remember from my career, and so I don't know if they're mentors as much as they were, but my bosses that I reported to, they still supported me, and I still consider them mentors because I don't think that every manager or boss is good at being a mentor. I think that's important to talk about, right? But when I was at a smaller startup, I worked for a woman named Natalie Hirsch. She's now senior director at an amazing company, still in customer success. But I think women specifically, not I think, I know women specifically face a lot of challenges in leadership. Um, it could be how we speak, how we carry ourselves, being doubted. We sometimes are in positions where we have to prove ourselves more, fight for a spot at the table. And sometimes that can come off as aggressive, or sometimes that can cause women to be afraid to be their authentic selves and take on another identity because they feel they have to do that to be successful. And something that Natalie showed to me was how to lead as your authentic self with calmness, kindness, knowing your intelligence level, knowing your authority, knowing what you are correct on, being confident in your stance, but being your authentic self as you state that, still leaving room for collaboration and feedback and pivoting when necessary. But she was very, very much an example, led by example, to where when I saw her in action and I saw how she carried herself, I was like, okay, that's who I want to be. I want to be that type of leader. I'd like to be a strong leader. And Natalie was super supportive when the opportunity came up for me at American Eagle Outfitters. So she didn't try to hold me back. She knew she was going to lose me, unfortunately, but she knew I had put a lot of effort into training and mentoring a strong
Yeah.
team to leave behind with her. I would say the second mentor or leader that I remember as being impactful was Michael Churko from American Eagle Outfitters. He hired me. I was with him for a couple of years, and he definitely was really good at supporting my confidence, supporting me using my voice. He really supported me in leading from my level. So even though I wasn't a manager, I wasn't in a leadership position, he recognized my subject matter expertise in fraud. He knew how to leverage it on the team. We had an amazing team, and everyone had their own skill sets. And he knew how to make space for me at the table. And when I shared that I felt like I'd hit a ceiling with him and that I wanted to shift over into broader fraud risk management at financial institutions, the first thing he said to me is like, yeah, do it. You better do it because you're going to do great. He knew before I even did it that I was going to do great, or he believed it. And he said it to me with confidence and supported me. And then I did. I started applying and I got a position, and I've done very, very well. Another challenge as I progressed, though, from entry level or senior analyst into more leadership positions in larger corporate financial institutions, was definitely people respecting my position as a leader. Again, challenges, no matter what it could be, opposing teams, um, it could be anything. But I had another leader at Wells Fargo named Dave Stetler that was incredible at creating space. And I think what we have to do when we're not in a certain population is we still need to be an ally, right? So he
Right.
was in a position where he was not struggling with having his voice heard, but he saw another leader, a peer that definitely, believe me, not struggling having my voice heard. I wouldn't have worked my way up to the level of leadership that I have without it. But he naturally and organically, if he did see opportunities, if he did notice someone cutting me off or treating me differently than they may treat a counterpart leader for various reasons, he would not hesitate to shift back to me and say, actually, I'm going to stop you. This is Angela's area of expertise. So we're going to go with what she says. We're going to, and it was very thoughtfully done. but very impactful. And I think that we need to be allies to each other in that regard. And that's something that he did. And not only did it benefit me at the time, but from a mentor perspective, all of these people that were in leadership positions that did something that benefited me at the time, they led by example to where someone like me who wasn't quite there yet picked up on all of that and just knew that aligns with me and who I want to be and who I authentically think that I am going to be as a leader. And that did stay with me the whole way I traveled up into my own leadership roles and mentorship roles. And I think that's really important.
Think as you're talking, Angela, just a lot of great things there, and just how nurturing that environment was, right? You already had that burning desire, that ganas to make an impact, but then that environment just propelled you up even higher, right? You said a lot of great things. One, about hiring for potential.
Yes.
I think a lot of people in, kind of managing, hiring managers, they miss that. And especially with technology, and we'll definitely get into it a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
But if whatever got you to your current position is not going to help you succeed or get you up higher, right? But I think we kind of fall back to what we know, right? Whether it's super technical in the weeds or is it strategic or anything in between, we want to look for people that have that quality. But I think we miss that potential because right now, the industry is really suffering. Allegedly there's 5.4 million global unfilled cybersecurity jobs, which I think that's a myth. But
You're like, where's
but I
that
think
stat coming
also
from?
well, right. So it's kind of circular reporting. And a lot of, big institutions, global institutions are sharing that data. And I'm like, well, it's just kind of people are picking it up and they're not really doing the research. But
Right.
I don't
Things
want to go
end
off
up
on a tangent.
sensationalized.
Right, right. The other thing is having confidence, right?
Mhm.
There was another guest, another previous episode, they mentioned, I can't teach confidence, right? That is something that is innate. It's based on your environment. So I think those two, having that nurturing mentorship environment to help you grow, which I'm a little jealous because I didn't have that in my career. It was always just obstacle after obstacle. And a lot of people that I talk to, a very similar situation. Oh, my boss doesn't support me. My boss throws me under the bus there. I think it's just amazing that you had that environment to grow to, where you're currently at right now.
Yeah, I think you said an important thing though. Um, people have mentioned, my boss throws me under the bus or this person doesn't support me with growth. I think an important message I want to interject here that I think has carried me where I've gotten, and this came from me and not any mentors, is owning your own path. If you work for a leader, and it's difficult probably for me to say this in today's job market than the job market that I was part of, but I'm gonna say it anyway because I think it's important that we stay committed to this. If you work for a toxic leader that is holding you back, you still are in control. You can leave. You can apply out. You can work with someone to help you boost up your resume, work on your transferable skills, start networking on LinkedIn, start showing who you are as an industry expert, no matter what level you're at. If you're entry level, you can still be an industry expert at that entry level and find another company that sees the value in you, that's going to pay you what you work, that what you're worth, give you the title that they feel like you deserve, and start fresh with a new group of people. Don't stay stuck and don't let other people tell you that you don't deserve to move forward or be promoted, that you don't deserve a pay raise, and especially don't tolerate any kind of any toxic kind of drama at the workplace. Again, it's easy for me to say it, and it's not always hard for people to do it, but you do own that part of your path and you can um and sharpening that skill and the ability to do that is how I built my career and how I got where I got. I have had toxic leaders and I have worked in areas that were just not good for me. and I hustled and grinded and exited and found the next rung on the ladder. So my trajectory does not look like a ladder. My trajectory looks like if you go to a rock climbing gym and you see peg over here, peg over here, peg over here, hand and then foot, going a little bit off to this side in order to still go up. That's what my path looks like. Um, and I think it's really important that people are confident in their own identity and ability to own their own path, get creative, and not give up on that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. So you shift to more of the financial institution or financial sector. What were some of the new challenges that you encountered, transitioning from a small, medium-sized company to more of kind of a juggernaut in in today's day and age?
Learning a lot more about how money moves. How money moves, because in the e-commerce environment, what we are focusing on is suspicious items in the order, um, some verification, some account takeover. There's suspicious attributes like trying to expedite the shipping, things like that. And we just decline the order and recall the order back shipping wise. We block a lot of those attributes, bad IP, phone number, etc. But there isn't the ability to see how money actually moves. And I was still fairly young. And just like most people, I was a regular customer. I had a debit card. I don't even think I had a credit card yet back then because I was afraid to have one. So I didn't understand sending wires. Maybe I'm depositing my check from my grandma. I'm going to the ATM. I'm taking $20. But the way that the money actually moves through the bank, the way that fraudsters can exploit it, all the regulations that are tied on top of it, the overlap between that broader financial crimes umbrella, because there's fraud, but then there is also financial crimes, anti-money laundering. They're under that broader cyber, right? They're under this broader umbrella. They all go hand in hand, but they're all very unique and complex, and they don't exist in that e-commerce environment. So it was really an overload to learn a much bigger and complex system quickly so that I could add the value that I wanted to add, but I still could rely on everything I learned in e-commerce for sure, because we are dealing with chargebacks, transaction monitoring, identifying, making sure the customer is who they say they are, etc. But it was like times that by a million. And
Right.
also, fraud teams are very small in e-commerce. They're very specialized. The companies I worked at, the teams ranged from maybe 3 to 12, and we would sometimes use contractors to help us at holiday. You are collaborating with lots of cross-functional teams and lots of verticals. You're working with product, you're working with technology, and you really have to learn how to navigate those conversations, understand how to speak all of those languages, and teach. You have to be able to show up at the table willing to learn and listen, but also confident in your perspective and presenting your subject matter expertise and stance. So that was all very new to me. Of course, that didn't happen overnight. I've been at financial institutions now for about 10 years. But that definitely was what showed up in the beginning, and then was
Mhm.
definitely a skill that I just had to practice and navigate throughout the years. How to influence people in a positive way, how to lead a conversation effectively with confidence, how to bring a group to a quick decision. That was all very new to me. I enjoy it. I think collaboration is so important in this, especially in the field of fraud, cybersecurity, financial crimes. The teams have to work together to really solve the problem. Shows up in different ways in the different areas. And
Right.
that's what actually drew me to wanting to go further than just being an analyst and get into more the risk management framework and leadership in the fraud space.
I think one of the biggest struggles in cyber is the lack of that communication. We have inherent silos for whatever reason. Maybe we just have our fiefdoms. This is my area. Don't nobody come
Yep.
in it.
Everyone's like,
Maybe
don't
it's
blame me. Don't look at my stuff. I'm doing the
right,
right thing.
right.
It's probably over there. They need to change what they're doing.
Yeah. Those are unfortunately, in technology speak or cyber speak, those are considered soft skills, which I try to change the verbiage around that. They're life skills at the
They
end of the
are.
day,
They
right?
are. Yep.
If you cannot effectively communicate with, your executives, with your peers, with the people that you're wanting to lead, and even in your personal life, right? If you can't talk with, a potential partner, then that's going to be problematic at the end of the
Absolutely.
day.
Problem solving and communication.
Yeah, definitely. A transitioning professional or student came to you and asked you about mentorship. How if they asked you how to get a mentor, what would be some advice that you would give them?
I think finding people on LinkedIn that are where you'd like to be. And when I say that, I don't mean if you're entry level that you would reach out to a senior director, right? Because there's lots of rungs along the ladder along the way. It's reach out to somebody that is at the next step that you want to be. They will most likely completely empathize with where you're at. Everybody's been there. People start usually at a certain point in their career and they have to climb the ladder. So find people that are where you would like to be, that have a similar path. And I love when people just reach out to me on LinkedIn with a very authentic message, introducing themselves, telling me they looked at my profile and that they really were inspired by my journey or something specific about my career path and ask me for a conversation. I can't do the hard things for you, right? I can't give you a job. I will not redo your resume for you, but I will certainly give you tips on how I used my resume to elevate from role to role to role, how to best explain your transferable skills. I will give advice on format. I will give advice on what type of roles to look for that are a step up from yours, but where you still meet a certain amount of the qualifications. Um, and I like to just hear what they think is holding them back. You know, what is holding you back? Do you feel like you struggle with a resume when it gets put in front of you? Do you feel like you struggle with interviewing? I often help people with interviewing. I think all of those things are really important. I did a lot of hard work to research those things myself, but all of the information came from somewhere, right? I didn't invent these concepts. I did a lot of
Right.
Googling and trial and error to figure this all out in my own life to get where I needed to be. But anything that I can share that resonates with someone because it's similar, there's that commonality, is what I think makes people a good match as far as mentor to mentor. So I have a lot of people reach out to me that are, for instance, veterans transitioning out of the Army. They were like a control tester in the Army or an auditor in the Army or did something IT or cyber related in the Army. And they will reach out to me and be like, hey, I'm exiting the Army, but what do I do next? I'm 30 years old, and I really need help on how do I get they need to get that door open. Once they're in, then they can continue to climb the path, but you've got to get that that first door open. So I get a lot of people reaching out to me with that. I also get a lot of people that are struggling from just exiting entry level. They've been a fraud, senior analyst, or an investigator for years, and they know that they're ready for the next level. They see the value that they add, but they're having trouble making the move. So sometimes it's a confidence thing, or it's maybe a lack of a strategy. But I do think while the previous interviewer that you interviewed said you can't teach someone confidence, you can't. And it is something that comes natural to a lot of people. But I think that if there are people that it doesn't come naturally to, the right mentor can nurture them, boost them up, and help them see themselves the way that I see them. And I really like to do that with people as well.
That's all great advice, Angela. So thank you for doing that for the community. So let's transition to the phrase of the millennia, which I'm kind of already tired of. I'm waiting for quantum to kind of just blow it out of the water. Generative artificial intelligence. So kind of a two-part question. First, macro, and then kind of more micro. So the macro part is it good or bad for society based on your experience?
So I think it's both, but if I had to pick a team, I would say it's good. I think it is good because I think if we stay in control of how we leverage it and how we utilize it, and we utilize it mindfully and thoughtfully with the right controls in place. Because remember, I'm risk management. You invited a risk management person on, so probably what I'm going to talk a lot about is controls. So just like anything else that we introduce into the environment, there's risk. If we start using rules and alerts instead of humans looking at every item, there's a risk. If we introduce AI, there's a risk, but we've got to performance monitor it, have controls around it, and be responsible with how we use it, test it properly before we start to introduce it. Where I also think, and this might be an unpopular opinion, that it's not going to manifest itself as fast as people think, at least in the fraud space. Fraudsters want to take the path of least resistance. While I do think we're going to see it, I don't think it's going to all of a sudden impact us like a massive attack. And I think we are going to need to tackle it the same way we tackle anything else. Make sure we understand and know how fraudsters are going to use it, and then think about how we can leverage it and use it to do our risk management smarter, more accurately, etc.
So it's almost, the attackers have this new weapon, the defenders have a new weapon, and let's see who comes up with the best strategy to either defend or attack. So I think that definitely, resonates with me. But in regards to the risk management and how to put guardrails and controls, I definitely agree with you on that. But I'm trying to think of an analogy. It's almost like we're on a train and we don't control it. And what I mean by that, it's, 4 or 5 companies in Silicon Valley spending enormous amounts of money. And they're not showing us how it's baked. Maybe the train isn't a good example. Maybe it's a dish, right? They're serving us dinner. We don't know what's in there. We might be allergic to things, but they're not going to give us the recipe on what they're making us there. So with that being said, how do we protect ourselves from a privacy, from an ethical standpoint, and making sure there is equity when these tools, essentially it's probably 5 individuals controlling not only here in the US, but globally, how we're going to interact with this tool in the future.
So I think that we have to stay in the mindset. And again, this is not new. Control what you can control, always, right? Don't focus on what you cannot control. Focus on what you can control. Have strategies in place. Kate, hard when something doesn't look or feel right, and at least protect your own environment. So if all of us take that stance for our little bubbles, right, then the bigger way as it travels up doesn't have all the control that they think that they have. And that's again not new, right? That's happened all throughout history with us living in a society, no matter what country you live in, that has different structures and leaderships and people making decisions. And then we have to understand their decisions, follow it, and react in the best way that we can for ourselves. And I think this situation is not any different.
I appreciate your insight on that. I'm currently reading a book, I think The AI Empire, and it talks about how OpenAI got started, and I barely started the book, so it's going to be definitely a fascinating read there. Here's another question that I always get from either transitioning professionals or, students within cybersecurity. Will AI take my job? How do you answer that?
No, because I don't think AI is going to eliminate the use of people. I think it's going to change the way we work because we have to be utilizing the AI, right? And I can give you a couple of examples. If I am, for instance, complaints data, I monitor that a lot because I want to see how our customers are authenticating. I want to see how our fraud claims process is working. I want to look at the customer experience. There is not a way, there is not a data attribute that exists most of the time within complaints data that's going to get me what I need. Microsoft Copilot has the ability for you to give it some prompts, and it will go through a 7,000 line item Excel document and tell you these are your key areas of trending, what you have to be careful about. Now, that's me using it in a controlled environment, right? I'm not using AI to search the entire internet where it is giving me information that might not be factual because it's pulling from Reddit conversations and Facebook conversations, and all kinds of weird websites and forums, right? That
Right.
Excel sheet, I know, only contains my complaint data. And I can also quality check my prompts because I do know how to manually sort and filter an Excel document to see whether the counts are correct or the information it's giving me is correct. So once I'm confident my prompts are correct, then I have created a much more efficient and accurate way to utilize that complaints data, which is something that I may not have done without AI because it would have been too manual and difficult. It wouldn't have been accurate. Or I could eliminate my own job by saying, I can't do this in my role because I'm not a data scientist. I need to give it to a data scientist. Well, I was able to do this and build this myself. I've spent a
Hmm.
lot of time the past 2 years reading a lot about AI, educating myself, and thinking, and yes, completely acknowledging all the things that can go wrong. It completely intrigues me, right, to study that. But I'm
Right.
much more focused on, but how can I use it to my benefit? So if then I am an industry expert in how to layer AI controls, real time data analysis, or partner with third party solutions that are utilizing AI in that way, to layer it on top of our foundation of controls within a bank for fraud or cyber, etc.,
Hmm.
then you are giving yourself more job security because you have created a new skill set for yourself. You have added value. You have solved a problem, and you are more of a specialized and valued expert where you go. Or you're able to market yourself that way on your resume. So I do think again that we will see it change. So I can't say that no one will lose their job because what if we find that we can use AI, and there's a lot of conversation on this right now, as fraud agents. And I started as a fraud agent and I learned a lot as a fraud agent and a fraud analyst, and that's how I got here. But no matter what tool we are using, we need humans to oversee that tool, to monitor its performance, to tweak and enhance it along the way. You would need to so become that person. And then you're not an entry level fraud agent anymore. You're on a team that is building AI prompts or creating AI agents, monitoring the performance of the agents, recommending enhancements and tweaks so that the AI agents are more accurate. That is how I think of it. That is my mindset. And
Hmm.
I don't think, again, it's any different. Any industry is always changing. There's people that are of the age that did not use computers at work. They didn't use emails at work. Even when I started
Right.
at that startup, I was faxing chargeback information to the issuers. I would literally do the
Wow.
chargeback information, print it out, fax it over. So we always adapt to advancing technologies. We always adapt to advancing cyber attacks and advancing fraud. That's never going to go away. Um, so it's up to us to keep up with that. And as far as keeping your job, again, I'm going to come back to like owning your own path, recognizing when you need to pivot, whether that's creating new skill sets, leaving the team you're on if you think it's going to be impacted, and staying ahead of that. And back to mentorship, if you're just not sure how to do that, find a mentor that's willing to have conversations with you. I love mentoring people, so I don't think I've ever said no to anybody that has reached out to me on LinkedIn, provided they were just really authentic, and I had the time.
Yeah. So, in other words, if you're complacent, then more than likely AI will replace you in your role. But if you're embrace it, learn from it, obviously you don't have, there's a lot of different trainings and classes that you can take. You can go real deep into kind of neural networks. I took a couple of classes, went over my head. But as you're talking, Angela, just what do you think will be in maybe 2 years? Yeah, in about 2 years, where do you think AI is going to be? I know these companies are talking about what AGI, I forgot what it stands for, which is supposed to be the pinnacle where it's thinking like us.
Hmm.
Um,
Did you read the
do you,
book Co-Intelligence by chance?
no, I haven't.
That's a good one.
Okay,
It's an AI focused book, and it was written by one of the first professors to go into the topic of AI. So it's very user friendly to read. It's not super like tech heavy as much as what you're talking about, more AI having the effect on society, and all the things that could go wrong if it starts to think like a human. So I definitely think in 2 years it's going to be a really interesting battle of bots. That's the only way to say it, because what's going to happen is we're going to see a lot more deep fakes. We already see, and I don't know the term, but one of my friends, Ryan Williams, who's in cyber, sent it to me earlier on LinkedIn, where a fraudster can create a completely artificial image, right? A male can create a really gorgeous woman and can move and talk, and the AI image will on the screen move and talk the same way, right? And we already know that there are bots being created, AI bots being created by fraudsters, that are in a massive amount at the same time trying to penetrate our systems and commit fraud. So in turn, we're going to create our own AI, right? Agents and
right.
all kinds of different alerts and stops. So I think it's going to be it's going to be like a constant battle, at least in our world, because of course, my line of thinking is more focused on the fraud industry. As far as
Mm,
society goes, it's going to, I think it's going to be twofold. I think it's going to be really impactful because I already have examples of people saying, I didn't know how to say this to my child in a way that was soft and firm, etc. So they just
right.
put it into Chat GPT or some of the other ones. I think Gemini is
Yeah.
commonly used. Like, how do I say this paragraph in a soft but firm way to someone 10 years old, right? And they come up with this really well written example. And it's like, that's fantastic. And then the human now has that knowledge and she will practice that going forward. So I think that's a positive way it can be used. I'll tell you an
Hmm.
example of the negative way it can be used. I know of an instance at another company, not a company I work at, but another peer in the industry, where they needed to quickly put in some regulatory compliance around crypto. They do international, and that's a very interesting environment on what regulations do we follow, what don't we, especially when you go global. They thought it would be a good idea to use ChatGPT because they were looking for reliable sources quickly, a lot of actual regulator information online. Obviously, you can go to any of these regulators and find it if you dig hard enough. But when you do the AI, the ChatGPT, the Gemini, right? I said this earlier, it's searching the whole open source. So there might be someone on Reddit that really knows nothing about crypto international, but they write their own really long, ridiculous thread with bad advice and and not knowledgeable, false information that all can get blended in. And
Right.
if we get into the habit of not thinking for ourselves, not doing the due diligence, if we trust AI, what we're really doing is getting a mirror back of all the good in society, but all the bad in society jumbled up and mixed together. And it can be completely inaccurate and go completely sideways. So those are the two things that I think are going to happen over the next 2 years. But again, it comes back to, why did they think that was the best idea to get to that regulatory information in a reliable way? Why did that human do that? Because that human introduced that risk into the environment. AI did not. But I think people will also use it in their personal lives. And who knows where that's going to take them as well. It's going to change the way we think for ourselves. And I think it's going to vary person to person, industry to industry, whether we understand to use it for good and responsibly, or whether we are selfish, lazy, greedy, and use it for bad. But again, what does that sound like? That sounds like the battle of society since day one.
Yeah, no, you mentioned a lot of great stuff there, Angela. I think my biggest concern is that the misinformation that is going out there. I leverage, Gen AI constantly, trying to do kind of agentic, which is a marketing term. It's just automation, right, with AI, and I try to slow it down. I'm like, whoa, you're asking too many questions, one at a time. I'm an idiot. I don't know how to do this. But it's just crazy. It's almost like having a tutor. But I guess my concern is that there's only a small little group of people that are kind of pushing this out. And there's a lot of money at play. And once there's a lot of money, to your point, greed comes into the picture there. But Angela,
unregulated.
Sorry, go ahead. Yes. Angela, I think we can talk here for hours here, but I definitely want to be respectful of your time. So the way we close the episodes with my guest is talking about books. You already mentioned a book before. And also just recently, somebody said, well, they don't read books, but they listen to a lot of podcasts. So I'm throwing that in there. Any books or podcasts that you like to share that just resonated with you recently? And it doesn't have to be about the work that we do.
So I have 2 or 3 that come to mind. So The Other Side of the Firewall was written by my friend and peer, Ryan Williams, and he's in cyber. He also has podcasts of the same name. But the reason his book is unique is it is not a technical book about cybersecurity, right? That's his background, is cyber. But he wanted to write a book that highlighted the leaders in the cyber industry, specifically minorities, people with unique stories, that maybe overcame challenges or had a unique path, and he wanted to highlight them. So he interviewed them through his podcast and then turned it into a book. So and it really, and I'm not technically in cybersecurity, right? I'm in fraud, but it definitely has a lot of overlap. But it's a really, really great book to just understand people's unique journeys, how they get where they got, and the challenges that they overcome, and the words they have to share with other people to motivate and inspire. And he is very passionate about assisting people in transitioning into cyber because they maybe have had some type of life change. So that one was really incredible. I'm also reading a book by Laisha Ward, Lead Like You Mean It. And her book was really inspiring because she faced a lot of challenges as a minority female in corporate America, flowing up through leadership. And her book is not about how to change yourself and be a specific type of leader. Her book is about understanding and getting to know your authentic self, your morals, your integrity, that system that carries you through life from day one, and transitioning that into how you lead so that you are always leading with your authentic self, and that you will be more successful if you holistically do that. And she does share a lot of her own personal stories and examples, and it's just really well written, very easy to get through. The third one, and I'm sorry, I'm a bookworm, so I'm always reading 2 to 3 books at the same time. But the third one is Keanu Reeves Is Not in Love with You by Becky Holmes. She is in the UK. She is an expert on scams. She is, like me, delving into AI, and she wrote an incredible book recently. It's very light read. She integrates a lot of humor, but yet she's very intelligent and mindful and empathetic. And of course, also very passionate about the challenges and stopping this fraud and these scams. But those are the three books that I'm reading right now that are very impactful for where we're at.
Yeah, they sound amazing. I'll make sure to put those in the show notes. But Angela, again, this has been an awesome conversation, and I appreciate your time and sharing your journey with me and the audience.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. And I'm sure I will talk to you soon.